begin with a question. How is your company's digital journey going? Are they innovators, the first out of the gate to implement the latest technology innovation? Perhaps they're early adopters, not the first, but a close second when it comes to embracing the latest IT advance. Or maybe they fall into that early or late majority group who chose to take a slower, more conservative approach to technology change. No matter the category you believe your enterprise fits into, we all know that today's technology innovations have enabled a literal sea change as far as how we work, live, play, and conduct global business today. Modern enterprises must keep up with technology change or suffer the dire consequences. CIOs and business leaders must also rise to the occasion by driving innovation in order to realize the goal of truly digital organization. In this report, we'll offer insight and best practices that will help speed your organization on the critical path to becoming a digitally enabled enterprise. This program features our own Michael Quinlan speaking with expert Vince DeLuca, CEO of Logicalis US, who is responsible for the overall technology and strategy of the organization. Logicalis is an international IT solutions and managed services provider with expertise in communications, collaboration, data center, cloud services, and managed services. There are several teaching points in the program. First, we'll discuss how technology has transformed organizations today and why it has become necessary for CIOs and business leaders to rethink enterprise computing from the ground up. Next, we'll dig deeper into the details of this IT and business transformation and learn why organizations must evolve from a technology-defined to service-defined enterprises. We'll conclude with best practices to keep in mind as businesses make the move to the service-defined computing world. Now let's begin our report.
Let's begin our discussion by considering how technology innovations continue to impact global business and enterprise computing today. We're all very much aware of the profound changes and truly amazing advantages that innovative technologies and leading-edge solutions have brought to global business today. Think for a moment of the rise of cloud computing, mobile, big data, and advanced analytics over the past decade. One can only imagine what further innovation will be set in motion as a result of these key technology advances. Transformative technologies have also initiated significant changes within IT departments. CIOs and IT leaders have had to completely realign their IT operations as well as redefine their relationships with their business colleagues. The old school method of running enterprise IT is no longer. In fact, today, CIOs and the IT organizations they lead have had to become more business responsive. A survey sponsored by Logicalis will give you a sense of the changes that CIOs and IT leaders are dealing with. According to the Logicalis survey of 400 globally based CIOs, 42% of CIOs are actively embracing a new internal service provider model that will allow them to provide increased business value and relevancy to their line of business colleagues and internal IT users. CIOs are clearly freeing themselves from the day-to-day operational IT tasks that have dominated their time in the past. 47% of CIOs are now procuring at least 30% of their IT services from external service providers, enabling better and faster access to technology services for their business colleagues. With that in mind, let's introduce our interview guest, Vince DeLuca, CEO of Logicalis US, and continue our discussion on the rise of the digitally enabled enterprise. Well, Vince, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Now, Vince, we've all witnessed the unprecedented changes that global computing has undergone going back a decade or more. Now, these technological innovations have also forced CIOs to rethink the way they support enterprise computing in their organizations today. So tell us, what's on the minds of CIOs as they guide their organizations through this transformative time?
Well, I think in today's world, with the advancement of technologies and how companies are using technologies, the world is really changing quite a bit. So in the past, I think most companies would develop a strategy, develop their execution plan, and then determine how technologies would fit into that. And what we're seeing today with the pace of change and the rapid deployment of technology across all sectors, companies' strategies are actually being formed around the use of technologies and the use of services to deploy those technologies to their to their end consumers, to their customers. So I think the world that a CIO lives in is changing dramatically. That person's customers are looking for speed, they're looking for agility, and they're looking for ubiquitous use of capability across almost every function that you could think of within a corporation.
So in terms of a typical business, what's actually changing?
So I think certainly there are a few things that are changing the way that companies are thinking about how they want to move forward, how they want to provide value to their customers, and how they excel in such an ever-changing and global marketplace that almost everyone lives in. Certainly cloud is a disruptor. Cloud has changed the way companies think about deploying and consuming applications, data, services. Data and information is becoming ubiquitous in terms of the vast amounts of information that exist that never existed before. I heard a statistic the other day that said 90% of all the information available to us was created in the last 18 months. So just think of how dramatic that change is. The use of mobile technology to consume information anywhere that you're at, on a phone, on a tablet, on a PC, on a laptop. So just having access to data in ways that you never had access to that information or applications. Being service consumed, so having an ability to consume that information via a services model. And then having a very secure underpinning of everything that makes sure that that information, the access to it, is kept within the boundaries that companies need to protect themselves from outside threats and outside influences that typically could do a lot of damage if that information gets into the wrong hands.
Now, Vince, I've heard the phrase disruptive innovation and disruptive technologies used in reference to the impact of technology change on enterprises today. What exactly do those two terms mean?
Well, you know, it certainly, I think, is in the way that people think about it. So, you know, many companies have established business models, but those business models are being disrupted by, you know, two individuals in a garage that are developing an application, or even more so, a platform that extends their capability into traditional business models in ways that we would have never thought of prior. So the one that everyone uses, and I think it's a good example just to exemplify what we're talking about, is Uber. Uber, through an application, through a customer experience, through a very, very friendly way of intersecting a consumer with transportation, changed the world of taxi cabs, buses, and other modes of transport as we know it. And that is done through an application that is innovative. It is very customer friendly. It links that customer with a real-time ability to see where those rides are. It links them to commerce, right, where they don't necessarily have to swipe a credit card to pay it. It's all linked into their account. And oh, by the way, they know enough about the customer where they can actually, in a particular car, play the favorite songs that a customer may have on a playlist, or, you know, whatever their preferences are. So that's one example of many that we're seeing where technology, innovation, platform changes, and business model changes are really disrupting the industries that we all live in and know. So our experience is formed through how we interact with our iPhones or with our tablets or with Android devices. And we want to extend that into the business community. We want to extend our personal experience into how we do work. That lane is being very blurred, right? Typically in the past, it used to be somewhat separate. And now you'll hear the word consumerization of IT taking shape in terms of the experience that people have and how they want that experience to be very simple, very common, and very easy in terms of how they intersect their personal lives with their business lives. So we see that whole change taking shape as well.
Vince, with the easy access to technology that today's accounting and finance professionals have, it can cause issues for the organization's IT group as well as its chief information officer. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think the CIO has a very daunting task in front of him or her. We've recently done a study where we've extended various questions out to some of the top organizations in the world and got some feedback. And one of the most resounding statistics that we've seen is that every CIO that we questioned, or 90% of the CIOs that we questioned in this study, said that they have been surpassed by business users going out and bypassing them and just consuming IT in a different way, whether it's an application, whether it's the purchase of infrastructure, whether it's the purchase of information. They no longer need to go through traditional channels to consume that technology. So CIOs, as a result of understanding this, have really put very big transformative projects in place so that they can still have a good and secure control over what customers are consuming and how they're consuming it. But they have to be fast, right? They have to be fast in their approach. They have to be transformative in their approach. And CIOs that adopt that mindset inevitably will have great user experiences to their end customers and therefore be valued by the organization and seen as an avenue that all business users in a particular company can go through to consume and to deploy and to acquire technology and information.
And how are CIOs doing with all this from your perspective? Will most reach their goals and succeed in their efforts and move their organizations closer to being a truly digitally enabled enterprise?
I think there's two camps, and certainly there's a middle ground as well. But CIOs that look at this as a transformative opportunity to help shape their companies different through the use of technology and services and have solid strategies in place to work with their end users and work with their business community to deploy technology and to deploy services in a rapid deployment methodology will succeed. Those that sort of stick in the old paradigm and really try to use what I'd call the old method of deploying technology and capabilities to their end users and to their consumers, inevitably will face the challenge that a lot of our CIOs responded to in our survey, and that is that the business users are simply going around them. And they can do so because they have the avenues to buy direct. There's many application capabilities out there. There's not big infrastructure requirements. And as a service is a dominant way of consuming, which business users have at their disposal in terms of being able to do that. So I think it really depends on the mindset of the organization, the mindset of the CIO, and the mindset of the business users in these respective organizations. We've seen companies that truly are willing to transform through the use of digital technology appoint senior leaders, i.e. a digital transformation officer or a digital officer within a company. And that level of commitment stems down through the entire organization and certainly provides a platform under which all those business users can work with to get to their desired goals.
Next, let's learn more about the journey toward becoming a digitally enabled enterprise. So, what exactly are the characteristics that are common to most successful digital enterprises? Well, the folks at Logicalis have identified 8 key areas where these organizations share common ground. We'll review these traits with you now. As we do, think about your firm's situation and see how many of these key characteristics can be found there. According to Logicalis, organizations that have successfully made the transition to truly digital enterprises all show a willingness to transform. Second, they are customer-centric. Third, the organizations are data-driven, meaning they are aware of the power of data and how to exploit it. Fourth, they are financially savvy and make good decisions about identifying new revenue sources and cost efficiencies. Fifth on the list, these digitally enabled organizations are redefining work by embracing the use of digitally enabled places and virtual spaces. Sixth is the critically important area of security. These organizations are aware of the dangers and are committed to addressing security risks. Seventh, these organizations are preparing and investing in digital-ready infrastructures. The eighth and final characteristics common to successful digital enterprises is they know what fast means. They're aware that rapid decision-making is a must for a digitally enabled enterprise. So, how many of the characteristics of successful digital enterprises can be found in your organization? These qualities are key toward reaching that lofty goal and worthy of your firm's time and investment. Now, let's bring back our expert, Vince DeLuca, and learn more about the journey toward the digitally enabled enterprise. Vince, we've just heard Logicalis' list of characteristics that are common to most all successful digital enterprises. Take a moment and give us your perspectives on these key concepts.
Well, I think there's a few things that are inherent to companies that have this digitally enabled profile that everyone's striving to get. One is, number one, the mindset to be able to transform, right? Having that plan in place, having that sponsorship, having the knowledge and know-how to deploy technologies in a way that's different than the way they've used to traditionally deploy technologies. Second is the power of information. So having information that is different forms of information that we've had in the past, the rapid explosion of information sources and types, and being able to use that to educate the businesses about their end users, their internal consumers, trends that are happening out there, and not only retrospectively looking at information, but proactively and predictively looking at information as well. And then the ultimate position around information would be that, you know, they can actually learn and adapt to things that are happening and use that information to just create a different platform under which those businesses will operate. So the power of information and the ability to make that intelligent and have that available to end users, I think, is paramount to the success of a future organization. We also have the need for infrastructures to be modernized. So there's a lot of infrastructure out there today that certainly had a fit for purpose and in some cases will remain a fit for purpose. But there's new applications being generated. There's software-defined environments that are being brought into how infrastructure and applications are managed, deployed, worked with in an everyday environment. And the infrastructure needs to be refreshed to take advantage of all the capabilities that exist out there and the intelligent way of managing, making them efficient, and having them be assets in terms of how companies use information to exploit their capabilities.
So it sounds as if the new role for CIOs and IT leaders is to provide strategy and guidance to the business. Is that correct? And please explain.
I think strategy and guidance are certainly paramount. There has to be a degree of operational capability that exists, but not in the old paradigm. Not in that everything is controlled, everything is locked down, everything is deployed through the use of traditional methods. This new generation of service consumption, fast, agile, quickly deployed applications and capabilities are what business users are demanding of IT organizations. So, look, I think there's a balance between having a very secure and manageable environment versus being adaptable to the kind of demands that are being placed on all organizations through what's available to each and every one of us as consumers. That needs to be infused into the way IT organizations think about their business users and their end customers as well.
Vince, so net, what we are talking about is a transformation from technology-defined to a service-defined way of operating for IT.
Absolutely, Mike. I think, as I mentioned, technology still plays a critical role. Digital enablement happens through the deployment of smart technology, but consumption will be through services. And we know there are varying factors out there that are taking shape that basically enables customers to take advantage of all this capability. Advanced technology, software orientation in the deployment, management, and continued evolution of how services are consumed. Information explosion, security, modern infrastructure, all those things come into play in terms of how customers will benefit through having a digital strategy, a transformation strategy, and then being able to take advantage of all of that to further their respective businesses.
Vince, does this in any way diminish the role of IT in the organization?
I don't think so, Mike. I think if you look at IT and the role they've played and how technology and services are defining the future generation of how companies operate, the role of IT becomes more critical than ever. I think IT has to transform in terms of how they work with their businesses. But as I mentioned earlier, strategies and execution plans were formed in the past and technology came in afterwards. Today, technology is at the forefront of how strategies are being developed, how execution plans are being developed, and how new business models are being formed, and even in traditional companies. So if IT can harness all of that and be front and center to the business users and to the executives in companies and work with them in ways that are different than the way they've worked with them in the past, they become the critical organization of future success. So I don't think IT is diminished at all. I think they have to change. But if they do it right, they're the catalyst for growth in most companies, because the technology and services and using them in a way that's different than they've been used in the past propels organizations to the future.
IDC, International Data Corporation, has labeled the innovation and change we're talking about as the third platform. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so IDC does use the word third platform, but it basically is taking a few different trends out there and basically saying these are the things that are going to influence how consumers use IT. So we already talked about cloud, right? Cloud is a disruptive set of capabilities and technologies that allow data to exist anywhere, processing to exist anywhere, and really expands capabilities at scale beyond anything that traditional organizations used to have at their disposal. So that's one. So cloud is key. Mobile, being able to use mobile devices in terms of consuming information, creating information, using either a phone, an intelligent device like a tablet, or even traditional devices like the larger tablets that existed a few years ago. All of that presents itself with a mobile experience that every one of us wants to use to be able to do their work. So mobile's another force in the third platform. Social, in the use of communities or social vehicles like Twitter or LinkedIn. They're changing the way companies communicate. They're changing the speed at which information is deployed. Vehicles like LinkedIn is, in a lot of cases, the predominant way that companies are recruiting for all levels of an organization, from executives down to lower level functions. So that's a key element. And then information and analytics, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. The explosion of information that's about to be upon us, we've only seen the tip of it, is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen. So our ability to harness that information, make it intelligent, use it from a historical perspective, but more so, use it to predict the future, use it to learn, and use it to really shape how companies are taking themselves forward is a completely different environment than we've ever experienced in the past. And then all of that has to be underpinned and secured. So when you talk about third platform, in essence, it's those four key elements with a very solid layer of security underpinning all of them.
I'm curious to know how the transition to service-defined actually takes place. Is there a roadmap or series of steps you can offer us?
Yeah, I think so. If we just take one element of a company and look at their infrastructure, certainly understanding what they have as a baseline is part and parcel to developing a roadmap in terms of going forward. Companies are in varying stages of sophistication, automation, orchestration, deployment, et cetera. So what we try to do is work with them, establish a baseline, and take them through very logical gates of progression to get them to a much more efficient capability in infrastructure. If you take that same approach and use it as a holistic enterprise architecture and look at the use of some of the third platform forces that we're seeing, how does cloud fit into that? How does social fit into your strategy? Where does mobile play? How does information flow? What are the processes that information is exchanged and shared in an organization? And then how all of that is secured. That in and of itself can provide companies with roadmaps to get to a much different position than where they're at today. Certainly have to understand their goals and objectives, have to understand their appetite for investment, have to understand return. But through all of those things, there is a logical progression to get from a current state to a future desired state.
Vince, you know that our audience consists of accounting and finance professionals. What message do you have for them about investing in a digitally enabled business?
Look, I think finance professionals are key to the success in all of this. There is a level of investment. My advice would be, really understand what this is going to get you, and look at it through a lens that's shorter than a quarter. Certainly, look, I understand the pressures that public companies are under, and that's quarterly results and it's guidance. And certainly, if those things falter in any way, shape, or form, the public markets aren't very responsive in a positive way. But for companies to take this leap, there has to be a degree of investment. So I would ask that the finance professionals embrace the deployment of technologies and services, really look at not what only it's going to do for the efficiency and capabilities in your current operation, but look at what it's going to do for you in the future, whether it's new lines of business, new business models, new ways to monetize capabilities, and most importantly, get to know your customers better through this use, and you'll have a business model that I think far exceeds the current capabilities that you have in your traditional business.
Well, Vince, we've talked a lot today about business users driving this change, allowing them to take charge in some respect of the technologies and applications that they're using. How do business users today measure their enterprise technology experience?
I think business users today measure their enterprise technology experience with their experience that they have in their personal lives. So their experience with Apple, their experience with Android, their experience with Google, their experience with Amazon. Those are all measurements. Their experience with social platforms. Those are all measurements that they use to gauge their enterprise technology experience. So when they come into work, they have stringent controls. It's not easy to navigate. They don't have the information when they need it. They have to use a specific device versus using what they normally use to conduct their personal business. All of those things are typically seen as very rigid, very strict, not accommodating to the way that the world is moving through the use of technology and services. So I think a personal experience is by far the biggest gauge that most people use to determine whether their enterprise technology and information and services experience is just as good.
Well, Vince, no doubt there are significant challenges for CIOs as they move their IT department toward the service-defined way of doing things. Tell us, what are the biggest challenges they are likely to face?
Well, I think change in and of itself is probably the biggest hurdle. So when we talk to companies, there are certainly operations that are running pretty efficiently. There's a significant amount of investment that's put and has been put into the current state. Making a leap to that next generation is not inexpensive, right? There's investment that needs to be made. So I think just the mindset of change is probably one of the biggest hurdles that exist out there. It's not easy. We're all creatures of habit, right? We like to live in the known, and this is a big unknown. But certainly I think there's enough proof out there now that companies, CIOs, executives can have at their disposal many beneficial case studies in terms of how companies have started to deploy technology and services in a unique way that not only makes them efficient in the back office, but it propels them forward in the front office. So, one of the things I think that is the most beneficial outcome of doing some of this is understanding your customer better. The more you understand your customer, the better solutions you're going to be able to provide to them. And the amount of sophistication that exists out there today in understanding behaviors of customer, patterns, how they use a particular service or technology, how they use particular points of information that exist out there, you can really craft solutions that are compelling. So, I think there's a number of different things that present formidable challenges to organizations, but once you cross that change hurdle and you can get your mindset to the future and understand the benefits, not again only in efficiency gains, but in really propelling your company forward in a material way. That's probably the biggest hurdle that we've seen. The I'll just sit here and wait and make sure that we're running the best organization possible, but not taking that leap, not being adaptive to the future that's coming upon us at a pace of change that's faster than we've ever seen it. Look, certainly there's companies that don't want to be on the bleeding edge, but if you don't disrupt, you're going to be disrupted. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
Based on what you have observed, what is the best way for CIOs to navigate these challenges?
Well, look, I think there's companies in varying degrees of maturity on this, so I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all formula, but I think the characteristics that exist in companies that will become successful in this digitally enabled world are the following. So one is that commitment to transform. Having executive sponsorship, having a digital officer in the company, that is certainly something that is key to success. I think I've harped quite a bit on information and how important that is. So CIOs that understand the power of information to their businesses and can architect a strategy to ensure that that information is real, it's current, and it helps those companies progress themselves is another key attribute to success. I think modernizing their infrastructure and applications, right? So having a plan to look at their current base, taking various steps, and this isn't a big bang kind of effect. There are I think evolutions and gates that have to be passed through to get to the desired state, but having a strategy and plan to modernize their infrastructure and applications is key. Certainly having a plan to secure everything, because as I mentioned earlier, we now live in a world where information is flowing inside and outside of our companies. Devices are controlled devices and uncontrolled devices. Information is everywhere. So having a security strategy that underpins all of this is key as well. So I really think, Mike, just having a very strong plan around how to bring all of this complexity together, make it simple for the end users, and having a structured plan to get to that desired state in each of those swim lanes is paramount to a CIO's success going forward.
We'll now conclude our report with best practices for organizations making the move toward successful digitally enabled organizations. In this report, we talked about how technology has transformed global businesses today. We also learned why it has become necessary for CIOs and business leaders to rethink the tried and true approach to organizational computing in order to become a successful digitally enabled enterprise. In addition, we identified the advantages of a service-defined versus technology-defined computing environment. Next, we'll offer best practices for organizations making the move to this brave new computing world. Vince, summarize some of the advice you offered today in the form of best practices to keep in mind as organizations step toward becoming a digitally enabled enterprise.
Yeah, so look, I think number one, embrace the challenge, embrace the change. Look at how your company, both back office and front office, can take advantage of such an ever-changing world that has huge potential around it. Make sure that your organization is structured to accommodate the business. Don't look at yourself as the central organization that controls everything, but really extend yourself into the business. Have a plan that embraces these new technologies and services, and make sure that you have a solid services strategy to be able to deliver these capabilities to all of the customers, whether internal or external. And in addition to that, take advantage of some of these things that we talked about. Modernize your infrastructure, use information in a way that's different than the way you've used it in the past, secure it, and make sure that you have the right security protocols in place. And by all means, get to know your customer better and use that information and intelligence to extend your capabilities far beyond your current capacity.
A parting word of advice for our viewers, please?
Embrace the change, have a digital strategy, take advantage of this wonderful technology and service capability that will exist, and you'll have a great business going forward.
Vince DeLuca, CEO of Logicalis US, thank you for sharing some great information with us today.
Thanks for your time, Mike. I really appreciate it.
That concludes our report, Enabling the Digital Enterprise. I'm Michael Quinlan, and thanks for watching.